It's coming along great.
No idea the hours are counting down. Or that a deranged man is giving the world a horrifying window into the mind of a predatory stalker. Under the crime scene tape,
I couldn't even make this up in a novel.
Patricia Cornwell, the world's most famous crime writer,
This is a gothic nightmare.
joins up with Primetime on a series of real-life cases.
A body can completely skeletonize in 2 weeks.
Unparalleled access to the secrets of the crime scene investigators. Tonight, Primetime with Patricia Cornwell, an unprecedented look inside the mind of a homicidal star stalker.
Good evening, I'm Diane Sawyer, and we welcome you to Primetime. Charlie Gibson's away tonight. Celebrity, that combination of allure and vulnerability, and not just to the lens of the video camera, to the eyes of fans who become predators. Tonight, thanks to 22 hours of videotape, we're going to take you into the mind of a terrifying celebrity stalker. And we want to warn you in advance that this could be very disturbing. This is not a report for children.
Hollywood, Florida, only a few miles from where the TV drama CSI Miami is set. But Patricia Cornwell, author of the bestseller Blowfly, is driving with a real crime scene investigator, Sue Courtney, a 12-year veteran. Courtney was there on September 16, 1996, when the manager of this housing complex saw something coming out of the walls under apartment A. It was blood.
And when he came out here, he noticed something coming down the sides of the walls here, just sort of dripping down.
Officer Courtney called for backup. Detective Tom Dandelay was just starting his shift.
I don't remember the exact quote, but it was kind of like, you got to see this to believe this.
So where did you have stopped right here when you first went in?
This is where I would start my photographs.
These are some of the pictures Courtney took as she entered the strange and mysterious world of Ricardo Lopez.
The first thing the police noticed when they entered the apartment was the body off to the left on the floor. This very badly decomposed man with the grease paint, red and black and green paint all over his face. There's a video camera that's set up in his direction, and there's peculiar things on the wall. He has written, "The best of me." He has a terrible racist slur against African Americans that's written on the wall.
There are also images of a beautiful young woman frozen on the television screen, and there in a sculpture. But the middle-aged investigators have not been watching MTV.
Did you recognize her?
I did not recognize her.
All they knew is that Lopez, just 21, had been dead 4 days, apparently by suicide, a gunshot in the head. But why the grease paint, and what about the video camera?
The lens of the video camera had the green and red, turns out grease paint on it. Same thing that was on the body.
The eyepiece.
The eyepiece.
At first, police have no idea that buried inside 22 hours of videotape, there will be a revelation of something that endangers a young star's life. And the tapes themselves will become a case study in the transformation of fan into stalker.
My name is Ricardo Lopez. Yesterday, I purchased this camera, and I will begin a documentation of my life, of my art, and of my plans. Can you see me?
Lopez, who has no previous criminal record, at first seems just shy, confused on the tape. He's also left behind an 803-page handwritten diary full of the musings of a young man embarrassed by his body and awkward around girls.
This is not how I always felt, especially when I was growing up, you know. I saw, you know, I had hopes and stuff like that with women and stuff, and even though I was fat and this and that, but, you know, I still had hopes.
There are times he's sort of affecting in some way as you're watching it.
I found as I went through his diary and watched some of the tape that I liked him. It was a sad situation, and before his thoughts began to turn so destructive towards Bjork, you almost wished that you could have sat down and talked with him and said, you know, there's some people who would like you. You know, he was smart, he was creative.
His family is middle class. They came to the U.S. from Uruguay, even though he's lived most of his life in America. And though he is extremely bright, he drops out of high school to become an artist. To support himself, he works part-time as an exterminator, fighting roaches.
Oh, man. Did I kick some ass tonight, man? And at that new restaurant, tons and tons of roaches. Tons.
Lopez takes refuge from his troubles by reading about the glamorous world of celebrities. The diary shows in the beginning he develops a huge crush on Gina Davis.
He watched Thelma and Louise, I think. He said in one place he watched it more than Hinckley watched Taxi Driver. That's scary.
He gives Davis up when he learns she'll marry director Rennie Harlan. And then he sees a video of a song called Human Behavior. He fastens on the face of the singer, and he is completely lost.
Wow, man, she's so beautiful. And strange, too. I've never really seen a girl that looks quite like her.
At the time, he's just 18 years old.
She entered my mind. Put it that way, you know. Obviously.
Bjork, the singer from Iceland, is famous for her gammon face and haunting voice.
Look at this beautiful face. This cute, innocent, sweet, and shy thing.
In the beginning, she seems to be just a muse for him, inspiring him to create artworks dedicated to her.
Well, here's a sculpture which I'm creating of Bjork.
On the tape, he analyzes his early drift from fan into fantasy.
I had nothing in my life really at that point. This gave me something, you know. Being in love, you know, having an infatuation, okay, it's a euphoric feeling, and I was very happy.
He keeps talking about Bjork's innocence, purity, his intention to give her his perfect, chaste love.
The most I've ever wanted to do with her is just hold, you know, just like, oh, I've had many fantasies of just holding her, you know.
Why is he naked? Most of the time.
I think it's because it was so bloody hot in that apartment, and I don't think he had air conditioning, but it is rather strange. He's parading and sort of assaulting everybody with this view of what he feels is his extremely unattractive, even grotesque body.
Is a stalker always motivated by sexuality? What's the relationship between sex and a stalker?
Well, it's considered a sex crime, but not in the same sense that you might consider what a serial killer does as a sexually motivated crime, because in that case, the sexual thrill is the actual murder. In the case of someone like Lopez, you know, he keeps saying that he does not want sex with her. The stalkers we're talking about very much, they stalk because they want some kind of connection with the target of their fantasies. They're not necessarily setting out to kill this person. They may not even know it's going to escalate to that.
Cornwell tries to get a sense of Lopez's physical world, the time he spent alone in this room, how he would go out occasionally to work or buy records.
Did he try to contact her? Did he write her fan mails all the time?
He did write her. He actually was painting pictures of her, and at one point he sent her a piece of his art, and he kept counting the days that went by that he did not get a response.
And poring over the written diary, Cornwell says you can see how Lopez's fantasy is becoming more and more consuming and less anchored in reality.
This is where he's saying, you know, talking about being ignored, which is clearly what he's beginning to feel by her. Because imagine he presents his artwork and he gets no response.
He says if she'd just written back just once, I would have been happy. Would he? Would that have stalled?
I don't think so. I think that people's perception of stalking is very erroneous. I mean, it's awful that people brag about it. Oh, I've been stalked, as if that means that you're attractive. When you're talking about a very serious crime that can have terrible results, and has nothing to do with your being attractive. It has to do with an anomaly of somebody's thinking.
And what Lopez is thinking and planning is still locked inside the tapes. As police begin to go through them, they listen in horror as Lopez builds and mails a lethal device. Will they be able to stop him?
I'm just gonna have to kill her.
When Primetime continues.
Scene of the crime continues.
It has now been 3 years since Ricardo Lopez first became fascinated with the singer Bjork.
Bjork has been an incredible part of my mind since '93. You know, since I first saw her. I've started with a crush, you know, and ended up with an obsession, which I'm not embarrassed to admit. No, it's an obsession.
He has never gone to one of her concerts or tried to approach her, but he is nonetheless a stalker, all from his squalid room, apartment A. Gradually, Lopez seems troubled by news accounts and suggestions in Bjork's music that she may not be quite the untouched creature he's created in his mind.
Big Time Sensuality, the song, when I first heard that, I was like, oh, you know. So I felt threatened by that, you know, her having sex.
And then he reads something else, something that seems to light a terrible fuse. He reads that Bjork has a lover.
Spin magazine, I believe it was last month. Little bitty article there, picture Bjork. Picture of a man by the name of Goldman. A black man. Of course. Don't you try black, you ain't going back.
He reacts in anger. For him, anger compounded by bigotry.
She's f***ing a nigger. Can you believe that? That's unacceptable.
He says, I just had a deliciously sadistic plan, and he talks about how he would like to inflict his pain onto her, that she has a new boyfriend, she is no stranger to male lust.
You know, started hitting the truck and saying, you know, he goes, you have no idea what I'm capable of. You think you know me, but you don't know me.
As Lopez's feelings grow angrier and more explosive, you can see there amid the clutter of his apartment, books on forensics, serial killers, crime.
The reason why I'm going to do this is because I want to do it. I want to do it. It's a joy for me to think. Just the fact of thinking about doing it is a joy, it's a rush.
I think that this should be studied by professionals. I think particularly a forensic psychologist or forensic psychiatrist could look at this and perhaps give us an understanding of the dynamics of star stalking.
Dr. Louis Schlesinger, forensic psychologist at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, pores over the documents, analyzing the combustible mix of fantasy and adolescent self-hatred.
Would you have some kind of diagnosis? What is wrong with this man?
He was secretly struggling for years with enormous feelings of inadequacy and sexual inadequacy.
A feeling so extreme that at one point Lopez turns the camera on his body to analyze what he calls a physical sexual inadequacy, one that could never satisfy Bjork.
I've never dreamed of her. Okay, the only thing I've ever fantasized about, if anything, was just bringing her pleasure to satisfy her need.
Schlesinger said stalking is considered an obsessional disorder stemming from an inability to form deep attachments to people in real life. He says he has seen them as young as 13 and as old as in their 60s. But one thing they have in common, they lose their grip on the real world. Lopez even makes a note that the tapes someday will be eyed by the FBI profiling unit, though Cornwell thinks he also has another viewer in mind.
Is he talking to us on the tape? Who's he talking to? It's a very intimate tone of voice.
He's talking to her. Let's kind of, if we sort of walk down the path of his fantasies for a moment, let's say to follow his fantasies, he met her backstage and she was really nice to him. Follow his fantasies even a little more, we get into the absurd. Let's say that she wrote to him now and then, they developed some sort of relationship, not a romantic one. How would that have changed things for him?
I don't think it would have, because what it would have done is it would have intensified his fantasies
So it
about
made it
her.
worse.
It would have made it worse. And once she disappointed him, once she behaved in a way that he felt was sexually inappropriate, she would have disappointed him.
And that had to have happened at some point.
But it's one thing to slip from fan to fanatic. What forces that last step into murder? It's part of Lopez's strange self-awareness that he tries to compare himself to famous stalkers in American life, reading books about them.
It takes on a root-like fixation and they can't shake it.
So it's almost like an exorcism. If they kill the person, it's like they're set free.
That's exactly correct. It's a liberation of their own conflicts.
Cornwell is reminded of another case from the headlines.
For example, in the case of Rebecca Schaefer. In 1989, 21-year-old Schaefer was starring in the sitcom My Sister Sam. For some time, she'd been getting mail from a fan named Robert Bardo, then a 19-year-old janitor. After 3 years of letters, she made a fatal error. She wrote back.
She wrote, Robert, your letter was the nicest and most real letter I ever received.
Bardo hired a private detective to get her home address, and one day showed up at her West Hollywood home. Her intercom was broken, so she came to the door. Schaefer chatted pleasantly with Bardo for a few moments, then closed the door. Then Bardo remembered he'd forgotten to give her a letter. It was in his bag, along with a .357 Magnum. He rang the bell again. Schaefer came to the door, but this time she was in a hurry.
You think you own the person. It's like ownership. If that person rejects you or whatever, it's like you want to express anger. Oh, you rejected me.
Rejected him, so he shot her. As she collapsed, her white terry cloth robe becoming soaked with blood, he says her last words were, "Why? Why?"
Back in Florida, Ricardo Lopez was feeling rejected too. What was he going to do about it? And what would be his weapon of choice?
I'm gonna send a package.
When Primetime continues.
Scene of the crime. We'll be right back.
Back at the apartment of Ricardo Lopez, investigators are about to uncover the secret on the videotapes and to discover that a lethal countdown has already begun.
What the police did at this crime scene and in this death of Ricardo Lopez is an example of what I would call perfect policing and perfect scene work.
It would have been so frighteningly easy for investigators simply to have watched the last minute of the tape to confirm it was a suicide.
You know, they're busy. They have a lot of other crimes to work, but the perfect policing is you look at all the evidence, don't make assumptions.
This team rewound the tape labeled The Last Day to the beginning and pressed play.
Okay, new tape. As I was saying, I'm about to put the sulfuric acid inside.
They hear Lopez talking about sulfuric acid. They're baffled. And then they see something else on the tape. A thick book, which Lopez seems to have hollowed out. Inside the book, some kind of electrical apparatus. Police sit transfixed by what they're seeing. Could it be that he's making a bomb? The investigators compare what they see on the tape to diagrams found at the apartment.
Looks like he's drawing a picture of his bomb.
But there is no bomb in the apartment. Is someone outside in terrible jeopardy? Remember, the investigators don't know who it is. As precious seconds pass, more videotape rolls by. Then, 11 minutes in, the words that make everything frighteningly clear. Lopez says, "Dear Bjork."
Dear Bjork, everyone's safety depends principally on the fact that nobody wishes to kill them.
Lopez, who has settled on his plan to rid himself of his obsession, is in fact constructing a bomb and placing it inside the hollowed-out book, which he'll later cover in red leather. He's constructing it so that if Bjork opens it, a trigger will hurl acid all over her face. Lopez even experiments with an unidentified liquid.
This is Bjork, and this is what happens to Bjork when she fucks with people. Wow. My God. I gotta see that in slow motion.
And even a small amount of acid on skin.
Be awful, just awful. And if there's enough of it, he didn't mention this, but if enough of it got into your airway or to your nose, I mean, you obviously could die from it too. Or if not, you might wish you had because of the disfigurement and the pain. If he had succeeded in destroying the face, of the object of his obsession, anytime that person looked in the mirror, who is she going to think about? Then the obsession is reversed, because you will think about that person every minute, every hour, every day of your life.
And where did Lopez get the idea of making a bomb? One intriguing possibility from Bjork herself. Had he seen this video of her song Army of Me on MTV? If so, he never reveals it to his video camera.
It's like a mail bomb in many ways, but it's not really an explosion. It's more like a melting of flesh.
The tape also documents Lopez's easy purchase of acid, and he starts out with hydrochloric.
Yes, hello, how you doing? Yes, I'm interested in purchasing some hydrochloric acid. Do you guys sell that? What's the smallest container that you have of that? Pint?
That's it. That's it. We got it. I got it. This is like more.
Ultimately, he will decide hydrochloric acid is not strong enough. He switches to sulfuric acid because it's more than twice as destructive.
That's right. I got 1 pint of sulfuric acid.
He tests the sulfuric acid on a piece of salami.
You see that? That's the after. This. You see all that damage? That's sulfuric acid. 96%. There you can see it better. All that blackness. Sulfuric acid. Wow. I said that was a direct hit. Wouldn't you?
But it's one thing to construct the bomb. How did Lopez have any chance of getting it into the hands of the singer?
How was he going to get it to her? I mean, what was his pretense that he was sending?
He created this bomb, and on it he put a cover letter, ostensibly from Elektra, the recording company.
What do you think? Is it cool or what? Looks pretty professional to me.
And the letter, which was very professionally done with a letterhead, said that this was an old book and it was being made into a movie by a famous director.
The film director, Mr. Rennie Harlan, and his casting director, Ms. Elizabeth Montgomery, have expressed their preoccupation with a small yet powerful character they adamantly believe you would be absolutely tailor-made for.
And it just seemed obvious that she should write the score for it.
Is that legit or what?
It was a very believable package, and it was put together very professionally. And the minute you recognize a logo like that, why would you open this thing to see what it is? You would have been curious. What is this book? What is this movie? So he knew right where to go.
Bad man at work. Today's Sunday, tomorrow you're gone, mother. This is X.
The tape documents the way Lopez may have gotten Bjork's home address, a celebrity service which gives away personal details for money.
And here they describe how much it costs. You know, the celebrity address list is $30. Okay, this is where I'm going to send for Bjork's. Right here, it's $5 a copy.
So, with Bjork's address in hand, he begins his final assembly of the bomb.
That's where it's all going to happen, right here. Boom.
Over in London, the unsuspecting Bjork is putting the finishing touches on a new album, which is called Homogenic. Back in Florida, Lopez arms the trigger of the bomb.
It's armed. I'm shaking. It's armed. Nervous. Very nervous. Excited. This is what it all boils down to. I will walk over there. I have my handgun loaded in my sack here.
Lopez, about to leave for the post office, says he'll start shooting if anything goes wrong. He won't be captured alive.
So, if I don't return, I just want to say goodbye to everybody.
But he returns to the apartment, successful.
Well, it went off almost without a hitch. I was real cool in there. I was just a little bit nervous.
And at this point, as detectives watch, they realize that the tape was made 4 days ago, and it only takes 5 days to reach London and Bjork's door.
London!
They had about 24 hours to stop that bomb. I mean, you can hear the clock ticking. It's like out of a movie, because that thing is traveling straight to her house.
24 hours to save a life, and everything has to go right. When Primetime returns.
Primetime's Scene of the Crime will continue after this from our ABC stations. Scene of the Crime continues. Once again, Diane Sawyer.
We've been talking about celebrity stalkers, but in fact, the Centers for Disease Control estimates in one report that in this country, 1.4 million people, known and unknown, are stalked every year. And the law makes it very difficult to take action unless a threat is made. Not only that, it's almost impossible to predict who will become a stalker and who will become a target.
The other thing that was grounding me to this world was Bjork. I mean, many people could say, what the hell are you talking about, man? You know, you don't even know this girl?
Ricardo Lopez did not really know his target, and Patricia Cornwell says, while the majority of stalkers in America are ex-spouses or lovers, even ordinary people can be targeted by strangers.
Is there ever any, I guess, common denominator in the ones they choose out of all the women in this case on TV and in the movies?
It can be any person at any time.
I'll give you an illustration. I recently went to talk to a serial killer named Angela Maturin Resendez on death row. Death row is a scary place, but Resendez was scarier. I've never seen more evil eyes. He's known as the rail killer because he would ride on freight trains until he saw a likely-looking victim, then he'd jump off, wait until the woman was alone, viciously murder her, then hop back on another train to make his getaway. He's admitted to 12 murders, but law enforcement people I've spoken to said his death toll might be as high as 80 women. I asked him how he chose his victims. Did they say something to set him off? I realized later I was trying to apply rational thought to an irrational process, because this is what he said.
Right before you would basically spot a victim or begin the kill, you would see a color.
Yeah.
Almost like an aura. What was that color?
It's a purple, blue, green.
So it's almost like it's something you can't help?
Yeah. It's, once the color is there, forget it. Then you need, if you really have a shotgun, it will help you.
And she says in the same way, celebrities do not create their stalkers, even though many of them fear speaking out because they might encourage it.
I'm very fortunate that I'm friends with Danny Aykroyd and his wife Donna Dixon, and I called them and I said, I know that they both have had problems with this, and I said, would you please come on camera and talk about this, because no one has, no one will.
In a Primetime exclusive, Aykroyd and his wife speak out for the first time about their stalkers and what it means to be on the other side of the obsession.
Hey, there's your girlfriend, Garth.
Donna Dixon, you'll remember her from Wayne's World and other films. She was just 16 years old back in her hometown, proud of her new Corvette when one sentence created a lifetime of fear.
I got out of my car and I said 4 words to this middle-aged man who was stepping out of his car, which was, "You've got great taste."
Because he had a Corvette also.
He had a Corvette too. That's all it takes. In a matter of a second, your life can entirely change.
The man she spoke to began following her, writing her, spying on her. For months, she says, she refused to go out unaccompanied. She was so afraid. As for Aykroyd, he's been stalked numerous times in his career.
Well, she came on the property, was caught by one of our staff, was escorted away, was arrested, was charged, and came back again about a year later. Was caught by one of our staff. She tried to do personal destruction to our house.
Like his wife, he says he felt violated and angry.
She rolls by in her beaten up, Mitsubishi Galant, and, plate number. Do you want the plate number, lady? I got it. And...
So again, pisses you off.
Oh, it sure does.
Aykroyd says New York's stalker law is better than many because you can file a charge based on repeated following, even if no explicit threat has been made.
And she was caught and is now serving time in the state prison.
But there was no law that could keep Ricardo Lopez from quietly plotting against the singer Bjork.
Yep. And that's my goal. Kill her, scare her, traumatize her. And more than anything, know my
stalking existence.
And as we said, he seems to have gotten her address easily. Today, with the internet, it could have been even easier. Cornwell and I asked cyberstalking expert Jane Hitchcock to see what she could dig up about us on the internet in just a few minutes.
Without giving out too much information here, I just did a real simple search, and that's where I got this phone number.
Oh, yuck.
I took this
It's a
phone
home
number.
phone number? All that is supposed to be unlisted and private.
But you can do an advanced search and search for things, and I found out more information, which is where I found out about where you live. Knowing some basic tools, it's not hard to find information about anybody online.
That's really scary.
It is scary.
Aykroyd says celebrities can take measures that restore a sense of control.
First of all, your driver's license should never have your real address on it. Same with credit cards.
But as frightening as it can be, Dixon says she learned something about breaking free from the psychological hold a stalker can create. But one day, she blocked her stalker's car, got help, and then forced him to run away.
Did it change you?
Well, it did. It taught me that no matter what happens, no matter where I am, no matter what circumstances I'm in, I know that I can depend on myself.
But as our story continues, the singer Bjork has no clue that back in Hollywood, Florida, Ricardo Lopez has a bomb on its way to her. He also has another violent act in his plan. What happens when Primetime returns?
Boom, boom, boom.
With Ricardo Lopez's bomb now almost at the doorstep of his target, he has a final act for his tape and his life. He paints his head red and green.
The paint. What's that about?
You know, I spent a long time trying to figure out why he shaved his head and painted his face.
Cornwell believes it was about a need to distance himself from what he was going to do.
I believe he was depersonalizing himself by changing his appearance so much that it would make it easier for him to shoot himself because he didn't look like himself. And as he's sitting there in the chair with the gun, he keeps picking up the mirror and looking at himself, and as if he's saying, that's not me.
What you're looking at here is at my life. Hello, you see me? Taurus. 0A153241. That's my life right there.
Cornwell hears what Lopez says on the tape about purchasing the gun.
I told him that I wanted it for home defense because somebody tried to break in here or something. I got scared.
Hello. My name's
She's curious to see if Lopez's purchase fulfilled all the legal requirements and so traces the gun to a shop nearby. The salesman still has the original application.
So this is the actual one he filled out?
Yes, it is. My signature, I guess I must have sold him the firearm.
On it, a small confirming insight into Lopez's
It's
self-contempt.
interesting, he lies about his height because he wasn't 6 feet tall. Not that that matters, but isn't that interesting? Must have bothered him, right?
How tall was he?
5'5".
It turns out everything about the purchase was fully within the law. So at this point, a stalker has become suicidal and has a gun in his hand. He is also homicidal, and his bomb is on its way to its target, Bjork. And when you listen to Lopez on the tape, he seems to be saying there is no other course, that nothing could have stopped this.
Everything I've done so far, I've accomplished. This is gonna happen.
Cornwell says sometimes family and friends could be a last line of defense, but they're not an infallible one.
I think that for people who know somebody who is obsessing and obsessing and obsessing about an individual, by understanding that what people do in these situations and that this is not healthy, you know, family and friends may perhaps intervene and realize, you know, this is not a good situation here. This person needs help. And maybe something can be prevented that way.
On his video, Lopez talks about his own family, affectionately, noting that from his reading about killers, most of them have brutal families, but his family is normal and kind.
See, that's a big difference between me and all these books. Okay, all these reviews, broken homes. No, I had a, not perfect, but a very stable foundation, strong family.
He also notes that his family sent him to a psychiatrist, and that he gave a hint to the psychiatrist something was wrong, but nothing about his true deranged plan.
I went to the psychiatrist Thursday. I told him my problem. Of course, I wasn't 100% honest. Can't be. Of course, I couldn't say anything about killing people or nothing.
Including killing himself.
These are the last few minutes of my life. I feel a little nervous now. You can do it. I'm definitely not drunk. I am not depressed. I know exactly what I'm doing. It is cocked back. It's ready to roll.
The videotape does not stop at this point, but we do. As Bjork's music plays in the background, Lopez puts the gun to his mouth and pulls the trigger.
Would it have been instant death with that bullet that way?
I think so. He would have hemorrhaged very quickly. Yes, he would have lost consciousness and within minutes would have been dead. And it sees black stuff on both sides? Yeah. That's pretty bizarre to me.
6 years later in the CSI lab, Patricia Cornwell and Sue Courtney noticed that on the gun, the grease paint is still wet.
Still, it rubs off, whatever this.
And remember, Lopez died believing that his bomb would reach Bjork.
I think that in some cases, you may be freeing yourself of the object of that obsession, but what you're also doing is you are bonding with that person for all eternity, because never will that person's name be mentioned again, for the most part, without the stalker's name being mentioned too. Mark David Chapman, John Lennon,
John Hinckley.
John Hinckley Jr., even Sirhan, when he was interviewed in prison many years ago by an FBI agent, said, "I am now more famous than Bobby Kennedy."
When we come back, the bomb on its way. The final act when Primetime continues. In London, Scotland Yard sets up a secret detection system for mail. It is a sophisticated system for tracing packages. And when they finally intercept the package from Florida, addressed to Bjork, it's at a post office in South London. The next stop would have been her home. Even now, Scotland Yard will not say precisely how they did it.
It just is astonishing that they were able to get this in time before it went to her house.
The package was taken to a secure location, and the bomb detonated.
They just said that they had reason to believe that there might be some parcel sent to Björk, and that they were going to screen it and not to worry because they had a system designed to deal with it.
They dealt with it in their time-honoured way, and apparently acid was sprayed in all directions, so it was a very nasty device.
And it was still operational. It would have worked.
It was called viable, which means that when they disposed of it, it had to have exploded, because you're not going to open it up and disarm it.
And what about Bjork? Right after the bomb was found, the shy, eccentric young girl emerged from her house.
There's nothing I can do about it, really. I just find it very sad that people get in that kind of state.
Cornwell hopes that by studying the Lopez tapes, and one fan's descent into stalking and then into madness, it will be possible to toughen existing anti-stalking laws.
And what's really sad is the law doesn't really protect people as much as you might like it to. I think they're making very arduous efforts to try to deal with stalking, but it's a very difficult crime to prove in many cases.
And Cornwell says if you cannot stop stalking at the outset, you risk a very high price.
My name is Ricardo Lopez. I'm 21.
I think there's a tremendous amount of envy that goes with what appears to be some sort of love. And if you think about that, it changes your perception of these stalkers. You should be outraged because in a way, these people want what you have. And at the end of the day, they'll take it from you if it's through destroying you, disfiguring you, taking away your life.
Today, all 50 states in America have some form of anti-stalking law. Even so, experts estimate 85% of stalkers still can't be prosecuted. I'm Diane Sawyer. We thank you for joining us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow morning on Good Morning America. Until then, for all of us at Primetime, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.